My husband always said his family was tight-knit. I didn't realize that meant keeping generational secrets buried together. They always said they were tight-knit. Holiday cards that looked like magazine spreads, matching scarves, perfect smiles, dogs and babies and fall leaves, all filtered with the same gentle glow. Inside jokes around the table. Coordinated potluck dishes like a choreographed ballet. The first time I met them, I left thinking. That felt more like a performance than a meal. But I told myself I just wasn't used to functional families. I'm 35, divorced once, raised by a mother who rotated boyfriends and debts with equal frequency. I had nothing to compare it to. So when Graham, my husband, now 38, introduced me to his family 3 years ago, I thought I'd stumbled into someone else's movie. His mother, Ruth, met me at the door with a fresh apron and fresh-baked lemon loaf. She smelled like lavender and order. His sister, Ellie, was all sunshine and white teeth. The kind of person who laughs softly at every joke, even the ones no one else hears. And Jack, his younger brother, had that kind of charisma that feels like a party trick. Always one story too many. Always a joke that lands just right. They all hugged, touched, called each other lovebug and sweetheart and mama bear. Dinner came with handwritten place cards. Grace was said in perfect sync. Dishes passed clockwise. No one interrupted. No one raised their voice. Even the silence felt rehearsed. They were perfect, or maybe just perfectly performed. Graham used to joke, "We're weirdly close. You'll get used to it." But close isn't the word. Close is sharing socks and splitting bills. This was curated. No one ever fought. No one ever contradicted Ruth. No one ever mentioned therapy or regret. But what stuck with me most, even in those first few visits, was the absence. Not just of tension, of June, Graham's paternal grandmother. She passed away 2 years before I met them, but she was everywhere. Her portrait hung in the hallway, stern and regal in a navy dress. Her china sat untouched in a glass cabinet. Her quilts were folded perfectly across the ends of beds, like museum pieces. And yet, no one ever talked about her. If her name came up at all, it was like a prayer, a quick nod, a soft "she'd be proud," or "bless her." Then the conversation would change. I once asked Ruth what she was like. She smiled and said, she was the kind of woman who kept a family together. That was all, and something about it stuck with me. Not what she said, what she didn't. Because for a woman who ran this family like a legacy brand, Ruth never talked about the one who came before her. Not really, not the real woman. And every time I looked at that portrait, June's eyes flat and distant, I wondered what wasn't being said. Who she really was, and why no one wanted to remember her out loud. It started with a box in the attic. We were visiting Ruth's for her birthday, a weekend full of pot roast, polite laughter, and curated nostalgia. Graham asked me to help him find the old photo albums. "They're probably in one of the bins marked family," he said. "Top shelf near the cedar trunk." The attic was exactly what you'd expect from Ruth, neat, labeled no cobwebs. The kind of space that smelled like dust and starch and a hint of lemon oil. I found the albums, 3 of them, cream-colored, leather-bound, each labeled by decade in perfect cursive. But behind the trunk, something else caught my eye. A gap in the wood paneling, a false seam, maybe an old repair, and a box, unlabeled, plain, dust-covered like it hadn't been touched in years. I pulled it out. It was lighter than I expected. Inside, a single journal. Dark green leather cracked at the spine. Pages yellowed, ink faded but still legible. The name inside the front cover stopped me. June Aldridge, no last name, no date. Just her handwriting, sharp, angled, a little impatient. I flipped it open. The first few pages were grocery lists, recipes, notations about weather, but a few entries in the tone changed. Longer sentences. Emotion packed in between tight, slanted loops. The words felt more confessional than casual. Not for memory, for release. And what I read didn't match anything I'd been told. Not by Ruth, not by Graham, not by the family who never said her name without softening their tone. There was grief and something sharper. A sense that what I was reading wasn't meant to be preserved, it was meant to be buried. I shut the box quietly, carried the albums downstairs like nothing had happened. But that night, while everyone else was telling childhood stories and clinking wine glasses. I sat in bed with June's journal and read the first real truth anyone in that house had ever said aloud. The first entry I really read was from 1976. June's handwriting was precise, unflinching, no flourishes, no apologies. She wrote, "He wants to marry her. I told him no. The baby will go to her family, she'll disappear. He'll stay on track." She was talking about her son, Graham's father, and not Ruth. I read the entry 3 times. The lines weren't emotional. They were clinical, strategic. No mention of love or heartbreak, just outcome, just order. I checked the date again, 1976. Graham's dad married Ruth in 1977, but there was no mention of a woman before her. No stories, no first love tucked inside old photo albums, no child. But June didn't write like she was speculating. She wrote like someone issuing a command. She'll disappear. He'll stay on track. Those weren't hopes, they were decisions. And just like that, the picture-perfect family dinner table flickered in my mind, place cards, matching sweaters, Ruth's tight smile, and I realized. I hadn't married into harmony. I'd married into a legacy, one that knew how to crop things out. Silently, permanently. I waited until Graham was brushing his teeth. We were back in our guest room, tucked away from the others. A quilt folded too tightly at the foot of the bed. Framed photos of birthdays I'd never attended staring down from the walls. He came out of the bathroom, towel slung around his neck, and I asked, softly, "Did your dad ever have a serious relationship before your mom?" He blinked, didn't laugh, didn't squint like he was trying to place the question, just blinked. Then said, "He dated a girl named Mariah, I think, before Mom." Why? Mariah, that name wasn't in the journal. But the way he said it, like a dusty file he hadn't opened in years, told me everything. He didn't know. He had no idea, no clue that there might have been a pregnancy, a decision. A woman whose name had been quietly scrubbed from the family tree. He doesn't know because none of them do, or at least they pretend not to. Because whatever happened, it didn't just vanish. It was erased. And now I was reading the parts that were never meant to be found. And I was starting to wonder, what else had been buried before I got here? I went back to the journal. Curled into bed while Graham dozed beside me, his arm draped over the pillow like he had no idea what storm I was pulling closer with every page. The next entry that caught me was dated 1982. After Graham was born, June wrote, "It's working, the image is intact. Ruth is a better mother than I ever was and smarter. She knows how to erase without leaving fingerprints." That line made me sit up. Erase what? Who? I read it again. Without leaving fingerprints. There was no shame in her words, just admiration. Like she'd handed Ruth the playbook and Ruth ran with it flawlessly. The family had always praised Ruth like she was the spine of the whole legacy. And now I understood why. She didn't just uphold tradition, she enforced it. Quietly. Efficiently, Ruth didn't just raise her children, she curated them. And suddenly, every story I'd been told about Graham's perfect childhood, the annual beach trips, the rules about don't bring drama to the table, it all sounded less like family, more like maintenance, not love, control. This wasn't just one hidden mistake. This was a system. I started asking soft questions, not accusations, just curiosity. Little things dropped gently during coffee or over the sink. Did Ruth and Graham's dad ever talk about old friends? Did Grandma June ever keep diaries? Was there ever a falling out with extended family? Ruth would smile, then change the subject with a precision that felt surgical. Ellie would freeze, her hand tightening around her wine glass, her eyes darting toward her mother before answering. "Jack." He didn't dodge. He just looked at me and said, "Don't go digging, Clara. There's no treasure down there." That was the moment I realized. They all knew something, and this wasn't just a buried story. This was a preserved one, polished, framed, held up to the world like a family heirloom, but only if no one asked where it came from. I wasn't just brushing against a secret. I was threatening a religion, one where truth is the heresy, and silence is the faith. The next entry changed everything. I found it folded between 2 blank pages near the back, as if it had been hidden from the others, even from June herself. It was dated March 1964. No preamble, just a single, jarring paragraph. She was crying again, Said she couldn't hear the baby. I told them to take her. Ruth was watching. Better to lock one woman away than let her poison 3 generations. I stopped breathing. It wasn't about Ruth. It was about Ruth's mother, the woman I'd never heard mentioned. Institutionalized. Disappeared from family history like a smudge wiped clean. The journal didn't say her name, just she. Just another woman removed for the sake of the image. And Ruth, she watched it happen, learned early how silence is inherited, and passed it down like bone structure. I read the line again. Better to lock one woman away than let her poison 3 generations. That wasn't protection. That was execution, of voice, of memory, of legacy. And I finally understood. This family doesn't heal its women. It buries them. Not in cemeteries, in stories, polished, perfect ones, where no one bleeds and no one remembers. I confronted Graham. Not with fire, not with accusation, just the truth. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, journal in my lap, and said, I found something in the attic. It's June's. I think you should read it. He didn't reach for it, didn't even lean closer. He just looked at me, tired, guarded, and said, My family is complicated. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. And in that moment, something inside me stopped trying. Not because he didn't believe me. Because he did, and still, he didn't want to know, didn't want to touch the truth, didn't want to hold it or hear it or see how far the rot had spread beneath the wallpaper. Because the illusion, it was safer. He wanted the version with the matching outfits. The one where Ruth ran the show and no one bled on the set. He didn't want history. He wanted continuity. I stared at the man I married and realized I was holding more truth about his family than he would ever want to carry. So I stopped offering, and I started planning, because I knew now. There was no place for me in that house, unless I was willing to disappear too. It was Jack's birthday dinner. Ruth pulled out the linen napkins. Ellie arranged the flowers. Graham opened wine with the bottle opener shaped like an anchor, a tradition, apparently. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Ruth stood at the head of the table and gave her toast. How proud she was of Jack, how grateful she was for a family that stays close no matter what. Everyone raised their glasses. Graham squeezed my hand and I stood up, slowly. Held the journal in both hands like scripture. My voice didn't shake. I found this in the attic, I said. It belonged to June. Silence, fork stilled. Ellie's smile froze mid-bite. I think there's something we should all hear. Then I read it. Better to lock one woman away than let her poison 3 generations. Word for word, slow, clear. I didn't explain it, didn't soften it, just let it land. Right there in the middle of Ruth's curated reality. The centerpiece wasn't roses anymore, it was truth. And for once, no one knew what to say, no one stopped me, no one stood up. When I finished, the silence was so thick it felt like fog. Ruth didn't speak, didn't gasp, didn't deny. She just sat there, perfect posture. Eyes fixed on a spot just past my shoulder, like if she didn't look directly at the words, they wouldn't exist. Graham stared at his plate. Like if he looked at me, he'd shatter. Ellie cried. Not loudly, not messily. Just tears falling into her lap as her hands clutched the napkin she never used. And Jack, he stood up, didn't say a word, just walked out the back door and let the screen slam behind him. No one chased him, no one filled the silence, because no one could. They didn't deny it. They didn't fight it. They just didn't want it said out loud, which is why I read it again. Slower. Better to lock one woman away than let her poison 3 generations. This time I didn't look at the journal. I looked straight at Ruth, because some truths aren't for the dead. They're for the ones still choosing to forget. I left the next morning. No bags flung over my shoulder. No shouting. No scenes, just me, walking down the hall while the house held its breath. Ruth didn't say goodbye. Ellie didn't come out of her room. Jack never came back from wherever he went. And Graham's. He stood by the front door, keys in hand, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the version that made this neat again. I thought we were going to build a future, he said. I looked at him, not angry. Not broken, just clear. I won't build it on someone else's grave. That's all I said. Then I walked out, got in my car, put the journal on the passenger seat like a seatbelt, not because I needed protection, but because it belonged with someone who wouldn't pretend it was dust. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Some exits don't need witnesses, just closure. I'm not sure what I'll do with it. The journal. Sometimes I think I'll write, publish it. Let the world see what tight-knit can look like when the thread is stitched through silence and control. Other times, I think I'll burn it. Let the lies go up in smoke. Set June free from the attic they built around her. But then I think maybe it's not mine to destroy. Maybe it's just mine to remember, to make sure someone does, because they still say it. Still sign their holiday cards, love from your tight-knit crew. Still post dinners with matching napkins and curated smiles. Still raise glasses to the version of themselves they rehearsed so well. And when people ask why I left, why I walked away from the perfect table, the family who had it all together, I say, because sometimes thread is just rope in disguise, and I wasn't going to be the next thing they tied down with it. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.